Shout out to the bow of the fifth colony. Or column, actually. This is the Zombie Weaver John of Roseman, California, 3:01 p.m., and it's June 23rd, 2024. Sleep deprived still and emotionally screwed up today. So, Starliner, still having issues. It's been about a week already since she started having conniption fits. No, she was starting to have conniption fits before she launched to get to the International Space Station. Boeing felt that everything was A-OK and started to discover that as soon as she left the plant, she had more issues than they counted on. I mean, they did have computer checks saying that, no, there's an issue, and they thought they got it right. And I remember watching it about, 2 or 3 weeks ago, seeing two people climbing into a test ship, and this was just a test flight for it. Now, Boeing had spent billions on this gamble here and launched up the the two test pilots. One of them, I think, was part of the old STS missions, and they were just going to see if the ship can go up to the International Space Station and back. No problem. Spend a few days up there, get some calibrations, float around a bit, get some publicity shots, test out the systems just in case. And when they kept testing out the systems, they figured out they had more problems than they actually had. I think it's got about 20, 29 or something like that. Reaction controlled thrusters to go up there. Five of them were malfunctioning because you had helium tanks not supplying it enough. Boeing kept doing some simple testing with the systems, firing off the rockets, measuring the helium, and trying to see if there's enough to get the two astronauts back home. If there isn't, they're going to have to be depending upon Elon Musk to do it. But Boeing says, no, we'll do the emergency. But they still have about a few more days to see whether or not they're actually going to be able to do this thing or not. Now, the issue is they have tanks leaking. They narrowed it down maybe five, maybe there's more, hopefully not. And if they can use the reaction control systems without them, they may, I say may, have a shot of getting home in one piece. The ship was designed to come in ballistically, and theoretically it could land on water, but mostly on land. Now, it's not like SpaceX's main engine that can actually just, boom, land on the ground, and that'd be nice. They're Musk's no, not SpaceX. Yeah, that's SpaceX. Anyway, Musk's company is trying to get their ships to have people land. But if they can just get their engines working, that's fine. But they have their Starship, a monstrosity, that's going to be sending people to the moon and hopefully landing on the moon in one piece. They haven't got to the point where they're going to be putting people on there just yet. So SpaceX is still working on that one. But Boeing's still trying to be a substitute transportation company here. They've been working with NASA on this one for several years. Designs and trying to make it as ballistic and simple as possible. Based on some on the Apollo 1 shot, on Apollo 1 space capsule and service module, but redesigned. They get a configuration where you put the conical spacecraft on top of the service engine, and then you have a main thrust unit to push it up into orbit, and then the rest of it is supposed to get up there and catch up with the International Space Station. Ships need reaction control systems to maneuver. They're basically gas jets. They basically have, I think they're super cooled jets to blow out of the thrusters, and it causes a ship to go one way or another. We're talking about laws of physics where equal and opposite forces happen. Meaning, if you're in space and you happen to get a manned maneuvering space unit, let's say basically a rocket pack on your back there, and you happen to fire thrusters, or probably in a pack, the force of the jets coming out is forcing the object to go forward. And it could go back. As if you got the other jets to force you back. In a ship, even space capsules, they need to have the ship aligned, rotated to where they're doing their orbit. They don't want to go out in deep space. They don't want to be crashing into Earth, but they have to have maneuvering thrusters to keep an orbit where the Earth is not grabbing them and saying, "You're mine," or else, "Bye-bye, sucker." No. She'll go make their orbits, and the important part is getting the ship aligned to a point where they're going to be doing re-entry. I don't have a capsule with me. Damn it. Oh well. Okay. Flat as hell. But imagine this brick is going to be going into the Earth. Now it's floating along, no problem. But eventually it's got to get into an attitude where the heat shields that they have on the bottom, well, they want to make sure that it's at a proper angle. They have to have the thrusters push the top up and have the bottom and have the other thrusters push down. So in space, the ship can do this to get a complete angle. When we had the space shuttle program going on, it was basically a glider plane. But they still had to maneuver the ship to where it wasn't flying upside down like the Earth would be above here, and the cockpit is right here, and then the wings are over here, and they're looking at it this way. No, they have to maneuver the ship so the Earth looks like it's down this way, and the top of the ship is up here. And so for the ballistic, they have to make sure that the angle is just right, making sure that the pitch and yaw is at their needed angles. So when it starts hitting the Earth's atmosphere, the heat shield that they have is going to be taking the brunt of Earth's atmosphere as it heats up and just making it into a fireball until it gets into the atmosphere, cools off a bit. And then the ship is supposed to be with parachutes popping up, and it's supposed to land either in the water or on the ground. Boom. Now, when we had the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions, all capsules, and they also have their own heat shields, they also had to have them tested left and right. Always had to make sure that everything was working okay on those things. But they already had lost a space capsule in the Mercury mission when Gus Grissom's hatch blew right after it landed in the water. Sank the ship, but he managed to survive. Because of that particular design and what happened with the hatch. it eventually was translated into Apollo 1, but the design was faulty. And the astronauts paid the price on that one. NASA has to be careful. NASA has to keep learning. NASA has to keep asking, what else can go wrong? They have to keep searching out imagination, because space is a risky business. You can't send someone up there, have them float around and come back home without making sure they're going to go upstairs safely enough, survive in space, and come back down and survive the re-entry. The surviving after that, different story altogether. But Starliner, they have a question about. It's similar to the ballistics. It basically is a ballistic, but it's similar to the designs of the Apollo capsule. Not the same, but similar. The heat shield they don't have an issue with, at least not yet anyway. They don't know. What they do have an issue with is the fuel necessary to use for the reactionary control systems. They've got a bunch of them in the surface ring underneath the capsule. And also they have some of those on the capsule itself. Now, I don't know which area they're talking about. Either it's in the capsule, which is buried in the designs of it, or basically the service module itself having most of the reactionary control systems. They call them RCS. And in there, they have specialized tanks. Now, I got to bone up on manuals if they've got them out there, because I want to see how many tanks they've got, where's the placement on these things, and can they get to them? Because the problem is, if they had this kind of situation happening with the Mercury situation, yeah, that would have been tragic for one guy to come home flame broiled because the RCS unit didn't work right. Or let alone the Gemini system, when they were having problems with the RCS unit, trying to stabilize their... there was one mission that they actually had, if I'm not mistaken, Armstrong was commanding that one, and somehow one of the thrusters was misfiring so much that they had to activate an automatic system to stabilize it. They wanted to make sure that the astronauts could do it themselves in space and not dependent upon the automatics just in case. The automatics were just in case. But they wanted to make sure that the astronauts were doing everything else they could. And they did everything they could on that ship. Screwed around with the mission, but they saved the ship. But they learned. They learned what was going on. So the ship was actually able to get back home. 2 astronauts safely came back home, and both of them became part of the Apollo missions. And they didn't have that kind of problem except during the cryo tanks that they actually had. Trying to make sure that there was a equal amount of heated liquid, or heated fuels, I think, going through the system so they could use it for reactionary control. Just maneuvering a ship when they can. But somehow, part of their oxygen system and part of the fuel got burst. I don't know if they ever solved the damn thing. I still got to read reports on that one. There's old reports online for this one. I still have to bury it. I still have to research that one. But there was an explosion on Apollo 13 that made sure that the landing wasn't going to happen. It was in the service module. Had it been somewhere else, that really would have been rotten for the crew. They did get their lunar lander out of part of the Apollo third structure, third tier of it. I think the fourth tier was a service module. They were actually able to use the lunar excursion module, or the LM, or LEM, as a lifeboat to barely survive going to the moon, around it, and come back home without making any landings or anything else like that. So they managed to do it. And That was something of a learning experience, and they were still trying to figure out what the hell happened. But I think they had their board of inquiry to figure it out, and like, okay, that's what happened. Concerning about the space shuttle program itself, I know that Columbia had lost tiles upon launch. And that's what doomed the ship. Challenger was a O-ring that suffered traumatic and sudden freezing, and then after that, thawing out, creating cracks to where the ship was exploding in the O-rings. It was in one of the solid rocket boosters. Blew the ship up. So space travel is a risk. So far, SpaceX has not experienced anything like that. Oh, they've lost ships on test, but not people. Not until they know that their ships were 100% safe and they could do it up again and again and again, that they were actually able to get people up in space to the space station and back. So we didn't have to depend upon the Russian space program. And that was good. Because after that, I don't know what the hell they were going to do. And that being said, on that one, now we got Boeing trying to figure out what they are going to do. What can they do? They don't know. They don't know. They're still trying to figure, still trying to analyze, and still trying to guess what needs to be done. And unfortunately, they still haven't quite figured it out yet. But they said for an emergency purposes, they can actually get the pilots down. Now, the thing of it is, if they're getting depletion in their helium tanks, they only came up with a limited supply. And I had to go online to look at if there was any diagrams, even illustrations, or actual pictures of what the service module looked like without the covering on the outside. Would they have been able to get to the helium tanks to fill them? And the problem is, every time I kept seeing these kind of engineering designs, there's no way in hell for anybody to get over there. Not for Mercury, because they didn't think about it. They didn't think about it during Gemini. They sure as hell didn't think about it in Apollo. For the space shuttle program, that's a different story altogether. They may or may not, I don't know. But they never had that kind of issue. But they worried more about the tiles getting them back home. Not much on the RCS system because they didn't have the issues with it. But now Boeing has the Starliner. And they have 2 crew members that are still on board the International Space Station. And they're trying to figure out what they're going to do next. They've got backups and redundancies. They try to do that because NASA wants backup and redundancies. And if they are actually able to maneuver the ship somewhat well without the malfunctioning RCS and helium tanks, maybe for an emergency they can get them down. But if not, and that's the question, isn't it? What are they going to do? I don't know. Because nobody has a clue. And the thing of it is, they can't open up the damn service module itself, go in there, and refill the damn thing. Where else are they going to get the helium? They need to get it from down below. They need to get the service module looked at and find out something. But they also need to look at the damn designs all over again to see whether or not, if they need to get into there, can they get in there in space? Which means you need to have somebody who is an engineer, who understands about the systems inside and out. You need to have somebody technically qualified to go up there and be able to be like a Star Trek Scotty and be able to fix the damn thing. So this is what we're dealing with. We have several other astronauts up there, still waiting for rotation out. They still got the SpaceX Dragon and Falcon working. Falcon rocket with the Dragon capsule. They can do about 4 people in there. But Boeing needs to get this damn thing fixed because they don't know what the hell they're going to do next. This is going to be affecting their entire company, or at least their aerospace section for that's handling the Starliner program. The shareholders and the chairman are going to have to be coming up with the harder decisions at this point. What's going to be more profitable to Boeing at this point? Was this a foolish error, or did they still want to do this? And if they do, they're more courageous than they give themselves credit for, or they're still trying to look for the money coming out of it. Especially if it's a lucrative government contract. They cannot screw up on this one. If they want to keep the government contract, they're going to have to hold on. They're going to have to find a way to make this work and salvageable. What happens if they run into the same situation the next time? They got to have major testing on this. They probably have about 2 or 3 other units, and not to mention the RCS units, and they're going to have to go through months of pouring over the data and the reports, but retesting all over again. Because in the bottom line, we're trying to get men into space, and there's going to be times that we're going to have issues. I mean, we talk about it in science fiction a lot, in books, in films, and television. We talk about issues that happen in space. And this is scary. This is terrifying. Because they don't know what to think about it. They don't know what to do about it. And this is why they have to keep going through this stuff, because this is what they have to do. And they got to do it. With that being said, guys, let's just hope that Boeing can pull this one out of the fire. Because basically we're going to be sending 2 astronauts in the Starliner capsule back to Earth. But after that, what happens? What happens next to the program? What happens next for every other astronaut that goes upstairs? It's one thing to make a taxi service to the International Space Station, which is not going to be lasting until another decade or 2. They're going to be crashing that thing, putting up a new space station up there. They're planning out. This one's already had maybe about 20 or 30 years? 20 or 30 years? Well, maybe more than that. Because Space Shuttle's been running since what? The 80s? 80s, 90s, 2000 something. 30 years. And in that time period, they had been building the International Space Station. It has been up there for, I think, since 90 through now. Almost 30 years. That's pretty damn old for a space station. But, if it's still working, fine. But if it isn't, the problem is they still need to have people coming up there to fix things. But the other thing I got a problem with, what about the other satellites we've still got up there? Like the Space Webb Telescope, if it needs fixing, or even the Hubble needs work on it, or even the Chandra that needs work on it. Yeah. Let's still got to talk about those things. What we need is like a Space 1999 space transport ship coming up there, and having technical crews going out there fixing things and coming right back. That's what we need. Something a little bit more that we can, something we can chew on. Wouldn't that be nice? And then maybe have a Moon Base Alpha.